We had a lot of big games at the tight end position in fantasy football in week 5. And honestly, guys, a lot of these guys are going to be here to stay. Obviously, we got some big performances finally from some of the big guys we've drafted. And we're already in week 6 fantasy football prep mode right now. So today we're addressing the hardest position to figure out every single week in fantasy football, which is the tight end position. We're getting into the top 12 tight ends for week 6 fantasy football, guys. I just hit 5,000 subscribers and I need your help to get to 6. So go down there and drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel to show your support. It is greatly appreciated every single day, guys. But let's go ahead and just jump right into these rankings right now. Number 1's never going to be a surprise. It's Travis Kelce. They're taking on the Denver Broncos on Thursday night. Now, here's the thing about Travis Kelce. Every week, if he plays, he's going to be number 1. I mean, even when you have guys like Sam Laporta on the come up and you've got TJ Hawkinson playing well, Mark Andrews, none of those guys are doing what Travis Kelce's doing. He's still averaging over 13 fantasy points per game, and he's still averaging more targets than all of those guys. So even though those guys are really fast approaching Travis Kelce, and Travis Kelce has not looked his best yet, it still doesn't matter. Now, the problem with this one is potentially that Travis Kelce is dealing with an injury. I'm filming this on Tuesday morning, and the last thing I've seen is that Travis Kelce is expected to practice today, and he's going to be ready to go on Thursday. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I would imagine he's probably going to be ready because he came back after injuring that ankle in that game versus Minnesota last week. So I would imagine that he's going to play. If he does play, there's no question. You know what I mean? There's just simply never a question here with Travis Kelce. Moving on to number 2, TJ Hawkinson taking on the Chicago Bears in Chicago this week. So TJ Hawkinson, either way, he's always going to be a top 3 or 4 tight end at the very least. There's no way I could ever rank him outside of my top 4. What's good about it, though, and honestly why I think TJ Hawkinson's about to go on a tear, is because obviously we've gotten news that Justin Jefferson is heading to the IR for Minnesota. So basically what their receiving core is led down to now is Jordan Addison, KJ Osborne, and TJ Hawkinson. He's the longest tenured one there. He's a veteran. This guy, I think that TJ Hawkinson this week against Chicago, it's all lined up. It's all lined up for a great week for TJ Hawkinson. You don't bench him either way. You never bench a guy like TJ Hawkinson. But this is a week I think that he's going to do great things in this type of matchup against this type of defense and in this situation without Justin Jefferson. At number 3 here, I've got Sam Laporta once again taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa. I mean, listen, I'll be honest with you. I wanted to put him at number 2. And actually, I wanted to put him at number 1 just to get some change up here. But when I looked at the numbers, it's like I can't put him above Travis Kelce. And just because of TJ Hawkinson having Justin Jefferson out, I can't put him above them either. So my thing with Sam Laporta is don't look at this as a slight. Like, he's great here at number 3. And he could be without Amon-Ra St. Brown again. Sam Laporta has been super important to this offense. It's unbelievable. You're seeing that he's getting 11.9 fantasy points per game, and he had 2 touchdowns this past week. Sam Laporta is just ridiculously good. Like, he has totally debunked my myth about rookie tight ends not being good. Not a myth, but what he's doing right now is incredible. And nobody can take it away from him. Tampa Bay's defense is not an ideal matchup, but honestly, Detroit is just so good offensively. And I can't take that away from them either. Detroit's offense is firepower. Offensive line, excellent. Quarterback, when protected, very, very good at delivering the ball. Receivers, weapons, excellent, excellent, excellent. Sam Laporta is just top notch right now. You cannot sit Sam Laporta. And you also can't sit Mark Andrews at number 4. Mark Andrews at number 4 is, again, the top 4 guys, don't take it as a slight. Which one's ranked above the other? Mark Andrews is obviously a great option. They're playing Tennessee this week in Tennessee. Again, great matchup. Tennessee can be thrown on. And I expect Mark Andrews to have a much better game this week. And it's not that he had a bad fantasy game last week. I mean, you could see the numbers on the screen. He's still averaging 12.6 fantasy points per game. So, like, he's been very important to this offense still. He's getting 7 targets a game. Mark Andrews has not gone anywhere. Mark Andrews is just in a situation where the offense, honestly, guys, and I discussed this on my Monday night live stream, and I've gotten pushback for it. The Ravens' offense has not looked as good as advertised. They just haven't. Lamar Jackson's not playing that well right now. That's a reality. But either way, Mark Andrews is just too important to this offense to not be inside of the top 4 tight end rankings on a weekly basis. Number 5, where'd you go, my man? George Kittle taking on the Cleveland Browns this week in Cleveland. I've been saying this for weeks. When it comes to a player like George Kittle, there's 2 things to this. Number 1, he's on an offense that has so many weapons, right? So he's got obviously Christian McCaffrey. There's obviously Brandon Ayuk. There's obviously Deebo Samuel. And then you've got George Kittle. Very similarly to the Philadelphia Eagles, not all of them are going to eat every week. In fact, every one of them is going to have a different week to eat. Last week, it was George Kittle's week against the Dallas Cowboys. Hat trick, 3 touchdown week. George Kittle was excellent again. And the other part of it is that George Kittle is such a great player, capable of those types of games. You can never sit George Kittle, and I've been saying that consistently through the bad games. I said, do not sit George Kittle because you can't get this kind of upside with just any other tight end. The upside is there. Even if he busts, I'm still going to continue to start George Kittle because we know what he can do because he just did it in week 5. Number 6, Cole Kmet. He's on fire right now, dude. You can't sit him against the Minnesota Vikings. This secondary is just one to be taken advantage of right now. I mean, Cole Kmet has been a pretty consistent target for the offense, but obviously the offense is starting to get it rolling now. And the opponent is going to be great. The opponent is absolutely fantastic. Cole Kmet's hot. And very similarly to George Kittle, I'm not putting Cole Kmet on my bench because I know that a lot of other tight ends like Zach Ertz, Tyler Higbee, Dalton Schultz, you know, those guys are going to get you a consistent 5 to 6, 7 targets. Hayden Hurst also in that category. But none of those guys have the big playability quite like Cole Kmet does. Cole Kmet is going to continue to be started, and I will continue to advise my audience to start Cole Kmet every single week, and especially in this type of matchup, there's no way I'm sitting Cole Kmet. Number 7, I've got Evan Ingram taking on the Indianapolis Colts in Jacksonville this week. Listen, I've gotten some questions on Evan Ingram this past week, actually. And here's my thing about Evan Ingram. The questions I've been getting are relating to, is he droppable? You know, should I trade him? You know, what should I do with him? And I say this every time. It goes back to everything that we've been just discussing, which is that when you have a tight end option who is just either on a much better offense than a lot of other tight ends, or they have big playability attached to them, you can't sit them even if they're in a slump. You just can't do that. Evan Ingram falls in that territory. Evan Ingram, though, when you look at his numbers on the screen, he's still been very involved in this offense. 7 targets a game, that's around where Calvin Ridley's at. 5.8 receptions per game, again, around where Calvin Ridley's at. 8.1 fantasy points per game because he hasn't found the end zone yet. Evan Ingram will find the end zone at some point. That's just the reality of what's going to happen. Against Indianapolis, absolutely could happen. I'm not going to guarantee it. I'm not going to predict it. But Evan Ingram falls in the category of guys that you just don't sit because not only is he a high upside player, and not only will he find the end zone at some point, but he's also very important to the offense, and the offense is starting to find their groove. Number 8, coming back again, Dallas Goedert taking on the New York Jets in New York this week. Dallas Goedert is the exact same scenario as George Kittle. You have a player who is on an elite level offense with lots of elite playmakers. A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, DeAndre Swift. Not everyone's going to eat the same week. And Dallas Goedert has been a bust in fantasy football up until last week. That's the reason I don't have him higher, is because I don't think that it's going to be consistent. But Dallas Goedert, you just can't sit. He's just too good when he gets the ball. He's got too high of upside. And as you can see on the screen, those numbers has significantly jumped just because of that 1 week. And again, he's capable of doing it every week because he's a very, very good tight end. And he's on a very, very good offense. And this matchup here against the Jets, where I think that A.J. Brown could have a tougher game, I expect Dallas Goedert to get open in this game. Number 9, Logan Thomas of the Washington Commanders, making his debut on the top 12 tight end rankings, taking on the Atlanta Falcons in Atlanta. Listen, Logan Thomas has been very, very good in fantasy football this year. Logan Thomas is a guy who's got 25 targets through 4 games. He's got 18 receptions. He's got 2 touchdowns. Logan Thomas has honestly been, if not the most consistent receiving option in Washington, the second most consistent. This guy is a legitimate tight end option right now. And Logan Thomas has been around this league for a long time. He's a big guy. He's an athlete, former quarterback. Logan Thomas understands how to read a defense. And that's something I've always really liked about Logan Thomas. And the way he's playing right now, taking on the Atlanta Falcons too, I think that Logan Thomas is a very fine start. Depending on who you have, if you've got a guy like Tyler Higbee or Dalton Schultz or Hayden Hurst, I would start Logan Thomas over all of those guys. Darren Waller at number 10 here, taking on the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo this week. So obviously, Darren Waller's on probably the worst offense in the league, if not the worst, top 3 worst, right? So there's already a huge problem there. The reason that Darren Waller sticks around in these rankings is because of his importance to the offense. I mean, you can see it on the screen. This guy is still very important. 6.8 targets per game, 47 yards per game. Again, just hasn't found the end zone. And honestly, I think he will at some point this season, but it's not as likely as it would be for Evan Ingram, as we discussed earlier. Darren Waller is just in a bad offense. That's really the ultimate problem here. And the matchup is not very good, but the only reason he finds himself in here is because we know that he's still good after the catch, and we know he can still take deep routes, and he's still a good receiving tight end, and he's also important to the offense. Those are the reasons that he's still on here, but I'm not excited to be playing Darren Waller any week. Number 11, Jake Ferguson of the Dallas Cowboys, taking on the Los Angeles Chargers in Los Angeles. So Jake Ferguson, along with every other Dallas player this past week, they had a bad week. I mean, nobody played well in fantasy football on the Dallas Cowboys. But Jake Ferguson is still, in my opinion, a very, very good tight end option because Dak Prescott is way more equipped to throw to tight ends. I mean, his target share is not like incredible or anything, but he's still averaging over 5 targets a game. So really what it comes down to is I just think that he's actually a better version of Dalton Schultz and a guy that you can consistently start because I think the offense is going to do better this week. The Chargers are a much easier matchup. So I don't love playing Jake Ferguson ever, but I do think that he still belongs inside the top 12. And at number 12, rounding it out, speaking of Dalton Schultz, we've got him here versus the New Orleans Saints this week. It's a very similar argument. This is a guy who is definitely not a big play threat. You're never going to get a Dallas Goedert type of week. You're never going to get a George Kittle type of week from him, right? That's just not in his nature. But what you will get is consistent targets, and you can see it on the screen right here. He's averaging over 5 targets a game. He's still getting open. He got 2 touchdowns so far this season. Dalton Schultz is still important to the offense, and he is a very key member of the CJ Stroud crew. So like he's definitely going to get open. And I do think that this week in particular is a little bit of a tougher week. But again, I think the target share is consistently there. And I don't really trust anybody else outside of this list to be over Dalton Schultz at this point. And as we do every week, I give you my underdog tight end option of the week that is not on the rankings right here. And honestly, this one probably sounds really simple, right? Like he's coming off a good week and everybody likes him as a player. He just hasn't been very good. I'm going with Kyle Pitts here against the Washington Commanders. Kyle Pitts actually was just snubbed outside my top 12. Like he was right there at 13. And Kyle Pitts to me is finally like I wouldn't say he hits a groove because there's no such thing as finding consistency in an Atlanta Falcons offense. This is a guy who I think that as good as he looked last week, he could easily bust. But I do like the matchup here against Washington. Washington is bleeding points to opponents right now. And I do think that Kyle Pitts is really one of their best receiving options. Of course, we know that. And he's coming off a good game last week. So I do think that there's more upside for more here with Kyle Pitts. And that's the shot I'm taking this week. So let me know what you think of the tight end rankings in the comments below and what questions you need answered for Week 6 fantasy football. And if you want to see the top 30 wide receiver rankings for Week 6 fantasy football, click on this video right here.